Hello my fellow chairs and tables. If you are a Dexter fan like myself, then you probably know about the two spin-off shows coming, a prequel titled Dexter Original Sin and a sequel show titled Dexter Resurrection. Resurrection's coming next year, but Original Sin just started its premiere. Now, as a more recent Dexter fan, I just watched the show for the first time a few months ago, and I am so invested into where they're taking the character with both of these shows. I noticed that the devoted Dexter fan base, or at least vast majority of it, hopped off the train a while ago, and has been kind of spreading negativity about this prequel show, saying like, oh, we don't need it, we didn't ask for this, we already know Dexter's backstory, so what story could they possibly be telling? I know I'm basically making fun of these people, but I actually do understand why they're so negative about it. Dexter's original ending was a baffling failure, and Dexter's New Blood's ending was a massive disappointment. So therefore, many people see this as a desperate attempt to regain the audience's trust in the Dexter universe, which is valid on both sides. I myself was actually kind of questioning some of the casting, specifically for Harry and Deborah. I thought everyone else looked pretty spot on in the trailer. So I guess the question we're asking here is this a desperate cash grab or a great story that is actually worth telling in an entire TV show? In this video, I'm going to be trying to answer that question by reviewing, analyzing, and breaking down the first episode of Dexter Original Sin titled And in the Beginning. Spoilers ahead, obviously. The episode begins with current day Dexter from New Blood, who is sent to the ER from being shot by his son Harrison. He flatlines and then he is brought back. He makes a joke about having a heartbeat, and then he says,
"It really is like they say. Your life flashes before your eyes."
And then we see an absolutely banger recreation of the original intro to original show. They did such a good job recreating the intro. It's literally almost identical. The first scene of the actual prequel show is Dexter looking down at the camera with his iconic plastic helmet. And we see that he is performing an autopsy in college. All of his classmates call him a freak, but his professor is very impressed. Dexter confesses to his professor that he doesn't feel emotions, and that his professor tells him that's what makes him special. This next scene I could have skipped because it's not important, but Dexter is taking his college graduation class photo, and the photographer tells him he's not smiling, so think of something that makes him happy. He then proceeds to think about the American Psycho novel, which is fucking hilarious. Something that was really lacking in the later half of Dexter and almost all of Dexter New Blood was the dark, quirky, corny humor, almost completely being self-aware to the point where it's really funny. The show so far has lots of that humor and it's refreshing, and I'm hoping from now on all of the episodes will feel like that. We then get to see our first legitimate crime scene where we get a brief introduction to some of the Miami Metro people such as Angel Masuka, the police captain, one of the detectives, and the forensics expert played by Sarah Michelle Gellar. Still kind of surreal to see her doing an acting role that's not from the 90s or early 2000s. Later that night at the dinner table, Harry tells Deborah to take Dexter to a college party because maybe he'll benefit from it, even though he doesn't want to go and Deborah doesn't want to take him, but they agree to it anyways. The next day, Dexter attends a career day festival of some sort, and he takes interest in the Miami Metro homicide booth where he's trying to look at the pictures, but Masuka, who is behind the booth, is just trying to take pictures of college women and is actively ignoring Dexter. Dexter says that two of the pictures of different crime scenes look like they were done by the same killer, but Masuka just tells him to fuck off so he can keep taking pictures of women.
Can you move? You're cock blocking my booth. Shoo.
We then see the police swatting some dude that they think is the killer from the crime scene earlier in the episode. The funny part is that he's just innocently taking a shower listening to Ice Ice Baby. The police just fucking tackle his ass out of the shower. We then see Dexter looking at a Playboy magazine, but instead of it's actually a magazine of the most prolific serial killers in history.
Time to go.
It's not what you think.
Dexter and Deborah attend the house party where Deborah is very at home and Dexter is very much not.
Oh, he just like me. He just like me for real.
Some asshole tries to make Deborah do a drinking challenge, but instead he roofies her, to which Deborah, best friend who invited her, tells Dexter about this, and Dexter runs into the upstairs bedroom to see Deb unconscious and the guy seemingly about to assay her, and then Dexter proceeds to beat the living fuck out of this dude, throw him down the stairs and punching him in the face before Deborah wakes up and stops the fight. Deborah is pissed at first, and then she realizes that Dexter really was looking out for her and trying to do the right thing by protecting her. They go home to find Harry waiting for them. He says he's a little mad they stayed out past curfew, but he's just glad that they're safe and sound. Then we see a flashback from before Dexter and Deborah were both born, and we see that Harry had a little son before, but his son accidentally drowned in the backyard swimming pool. Now I have a few thoughts on the scene. It does feel kind of shoehorned in because this never happened in the original show. It also fills in some blanks. It explains why Harry didn't stop for a second to adopt Dexter. He felt like he was being given a second chance to be a dad again and didn't want to fuck it up this time. It adds a little more weight to this version of Harry. At the same time, it also does kind of feel forced. It's very conflicting. Anyways, the next morning, Dexter and Harry go on a hunting trip where Harry suffers from a heart attack. He's rushed to a small local ER, and this whole part of the episode is basically where we get an extended look at a flashback from the original show, Dexter's first kill. Dexter finds out that Harry's nurse is a serial killer and is poisoning her patients. Harry reluctantly gives Dexter permission to stop her.
But tonight's the night.
He said it! He said it! Anyways, Dexter waits for Nurse Mary to come home before tackling her, wrestling her for a minute before knocking her out. He straps her to the table, confronts her about killing her patients before finally stabbing her. This next part is the scene I found really interesting. He goes to the Everglades and feeds the body to a bunch of gators. It seemed effective at the moment, but now I'm curious as to when he changes to dumping them in the ocean and why. So maybe later on the police will find a bunch of body parts in the Everglades or some shit. Dexter goes back home to see the police force delivering a bunch of food as a get well soon gift for Harry. Masuka and Sarah Michelle Gellar, I'm sorry, I don't know her character's name, it's like Tanya or some shit. They offer Dexter a paid intern as a forensic at Miami Metro, to which he accepts. Dexter and Deborah bring Harry back home from the hospital because he miraculously got better. And then Dexter and Harry have kind of this moment together where Harry is grateful that Dexter saved his life and he's almost proud that Dexter killed the nurse. But at the same time, he knows that Dexter will never be the same. I mean, this entire episode, he had been trying different ways to satisfy Dexter's urges, hunting, an autopsy, partying, none have worked. He really was just delaying the inevitable. So when Dexter leaves the room, Harry actually breaks down crying with the realization that his son is now a monster and is responsible for creating that monster. The episode ends with a wholesome scene of Dexter starting his first day as a forensics intern. They released this as the first clip from the show, which is the end of the episode. I'm not sure why they did that, but nonetheless, it's cool. I gotta say though, I really like this first episode, but I can also understand the people who don't. My only gripe with it is that the show might not be for beginners because you kind of need prior knowledge of both Dexter and Dexter New Blood. Another thing that I was kind of worried about was the casting of Original Sin, especially with Harry and Deborah, but them both and everyone else killed it. I mean, Angel and Masuka alone look and sound identical to their original self, and all the new characters seem pretty cool. I'm interested to see when they introduce LaGuerta, when and how she'll be introduced, which I'm sure she'll be great. And I'm also curious if they'll introduce a young Dokes. Even though this episode is really just an extended retelling of flashbacks from season 1 of the OG show, I think it was kind of a necessary way to start the show as kind of like a recap, but I'm hoping from now on it'll be all new territory of stuff we haven't seen before, and that's when the show will really take off. I think if you're someone who's been on the fence about this show, you should really give it a try, and hopefully me saying that won't age really poorly, and the show will stay pretty good. Episode 2, titled Kid in a Candy Store. The episode begins with Dexter officially starting his first day as a forensics intern. We get a wholesome moment between Tanya, Masuka, and Dexter before the show takes a dark-ass turn, and we see a mysterious child kidnapper holding a kid hostage in a dark basement. We'll come back to that in a bit. We see that Harry has returned back to work, and he has a wholesome moment with the other cops joking about his heart attack.
Listen, I faked it so I could get a break from you knuckleheads.
Harry and Dexter are called to a crime scene, but before they leave, Harry takes Dexter to the side and asks him if killing Nurse Mary will be enough to satisfy his needs, and maybe now he could just help arrest bad guys.
Like methadone for heroin addict.
Dexter gets his first ever crime scene, essentially creams his pants. Dexter straight up says that it feels like Christmas morning, and the editors do a really funny bit of showing a bow on the dead body. Dexter tries to give his input on what happened during the crime, and all the cops laugh at him because it's blatantly obvious what happened. Harry notices this and pulls Dexter aside and tells him not to worry. They like to fuck with everyone, especially him since he's the new kid. I'm not gonna lie, this scene honestly gave me secondhand embarrassment. Like, I would hate to be trying my best and all my coworkers are just making fun of me for stating the obvious. Anyways, we get to see a flashback of how Harry met Dexter's birth mother, Laura. He saves Laura from a shitty drug dealer and makes a deal with her to take down other drug dealers so she won't be charged with any crimes. Going back to present day, the boys decide to go out for lunch after finishing at the crime scene, and this is a scene that surprisingly a lot of people are talking about online. Dexter saves a table for his new friends, and someone walks up asking if someone is sitting at his table with him. Fans have noticed that this random guy with one line looks a lot like Brian Moser, the ice truck killer. As far as we know, Brian was looking for Dexter for years, and this guy looks and sounds identical to Brian, but I just find it hard to believe that it's actually him. I mean, if it was Brian, he wouldn't care that someone else is having lunch with Dexter. He would still sit down and talk to Dexter anyway. And if Brian actually found Dexter this early, it wouldn't make any sense as to why Brian then confronts Dexter like 15 years later in the main show. Maybe this was just a simple wink at the audience, maybe just a coincidence, I don't know. Harry and Dexter go home and try to talk in secret while Deborah's cooking food, but she's just not having it. Some people say she's overly annoying, but I mean she's kind of supposed to be, and she has a good reason to be. She feels like she's being excluded from everything in her own family. I mean, later on the episode, she straight up tells Harry, at least when mom was still alive, I had someone, now I have no one. And I like this quote because it's probably relatable for a lot of people. Maybe not to this extent where your sibling's a serial killer, but just feeling left out or untreated unfairly for seemingly unknown reasons. And that's also why I love these next few episodes, especially episode 3, which builds the relationship between Deborah and Dexter, making them closer and not hate each other.
Detective Batista?
We see Harry ask Angel to befriend Dexter and take him under his wing.
He can be a bit,
Socially awkward.
Sorry, Angel, my son Dexter is a bit autistic.
Should I invite Masuka? I think he's younger than me.
Masuka's better in smaller doses.
Anyways, Dexter goes to talk to Camilla, who's also from the original show, and she looks great. He asks to see some case files, to which he searches a bunch to find killers that had escaped the law that he could potentially kill. And that's when we hear the name of the episode.
I was a kid in a candy store.
Later that night, Angel takes Dexter to a Spanish bar where they have a wholesome moment together where Angel's trying to teach Dexter how to dance and make good jokes. The whole bar toasts to a son and a mother who recently died, and Dexter asks Angel what happened out of curiosity. Angel tells Dexter that this rich dude named Tony purposely goes into business with people in debt and gives them a loan knowing they'll never be able to pay it back. When they don't pay it back, he kills them, and the police have never caught him because there's never been enough evidence that he killed them. And we see in Dexter's face that we know what he's gonna do now, and that was all the permission he needed. We then get a flash of the child from earlier in the episode, and we see his finger getting chopped off, which we will also come back to. Then we see Deborah trying to pawn Dexter's earrings that he stole from Nurse Mary as a trophy. Deb ends up just giving them to her best friend because no pawn will buy it. We then see that the police have anonymously been sent the child's finger, and they check it for prints to confirm it's the missing child that was reported a while ago. The episode ends with a really cool scene of Dexter looking up at the ceiling, imagining Tony's prison mugshot and thinking about killing him, which then leads us into episode 3 titled Miami Vice. This episode begins with the introduction of the one and only Maria LaGuerta. Not only does this Maria look exactly like the old one, she speaks perfect Spanish and she is sassy as fuck.
Detective Batista.
Detective Maria LaGuerta, I work here now, and I don't fraternize with colleagues.
Bro does not have the la pasión. Anyways, the police captain introduces everyone to her and says he brought her in to help solve more cases since their solve rate is like 18% or some shit like that. Later, we see Dexter stalking Tony and learning his schedule, checking his house to see that he is guilty. Later that night, Deborah's best friend comes over to the house and Dexter realizes that she has his earrings and he needs them back because they're police evidence. He makes a deal with Deborah to get them back from her best friend, in which Dexter will make fake cocaine for Deborah's volleyball team party so all of them will think Deborah's cool and vote her as team captain. And in return, Deborah will buy her best friend new earrings so he can have the old ones back. The next morning, Dexter confesses to Harry what's going on, and Harry is disgusted that Dexter took trophies, and he demands that Dexter get them back and destroy them immediately. Dexter reluctantly agrees. Dexter tracks down Tony and pretends to be a person in need of a loan. Dexter finds Tony again a week later, tells him he doesn't have the money, and shoots a warning shot at Dexter. Dexter digs out the bullet from a tree, and he matches it with the bullet that killed the mother of his son from the bar, confirming Tony's guilt. Dexter goes to Harry and tells him his plan to take down Tony. Harry basically tells him, do what you gotta do, just follow the code, don't take trophies. We then get to see more backstory in Harry and Laura's relationship before she died. Harry wasn't trying to have an affair, he had just grown extremely worried about and cared for Laura a little too much. Harry sends Laura on a risky mission wearing a wire to try to get Estrada, the man who eventually kills her. But before she can report back to Harry, she's forced into a car with presumably Estrada's right-hand man. He plays it off really well and manages to convince him that she's not working for the cops, but we're unsure if the dude actually buys it. We do find later on that he does let her go. Back in the present day, Dexter gets back the earrings and heads over to finish his business with Tony. Dexter distracts Tony using his pet parrot and then wrestles with him before putting him to sleep with a chokehold.
Honey, I'm home.
Find yourself a new home, honey.
Dexter gets Tony to confess that he likes hurting people, and he just willy-nilly swipes at Tony, murdering him dead. Dexter then drives the body to the Everglades once again, feeds Tony's body to the gators, only this time we see that the gator doesn't eat the entire thing, and there's just an entire arm just floating on the surface, which I completely guessed would happen in my last video, and the reason why he would switch his method of dumping the bodies into the ocean in garbage bags. I have a feeling that someone's gonna see it, report it to the police, and maybe Tanya and Masuka are gonna try to investigate it. The next day, Dexter and Deborah have a wholesome moment at a restaurant in which they finally reach each other on an understanding level. Now they both feel like they have each other's back no matter what, which perfectly describes their relationship for most of the main Dexter show. I think so far this formula works. Context into flashbacks we've already seen, mixed with a new story we've never seen with the child kidnapper and with Dexter throwing bodies in the swamp. I'm very curious to see where it goes next, and hopefully the child kidnapper will become more of a cool new killer we can add to the universe. Even if you didn't like Dexter New Blood, you gotta admit the runaway killer was easily a top 5 Dexter villains. So hopefully this one we can add to that list. But yeah, I don't really have much to say about these 2 episodes. They're mainly just set up filler episodes, which is probably why they released them at the same time. Episode 4 is titled Fender Bender and immediately opens with a literal dead child hanging from a public bridge. Dexter witnesses this and immediately starts having a panic attack. He doesn't yet know this, but he's having PTSD from when he was found in the shipyard container as a kid. Harry comforts him, telling him it's okay, and this is a normal feeling to have, especially when seeing dead kids. Harry sends Dexter to a smaller crime scene where he performs his first legitimate forensics analysis for La Guerta. We then see Harry asking Camilla if she's sure that she destroyed all files on Dexter being in the shipyard container, and she confirms with him that she did. I find this scene interesting because this is the first time Harry openly admits that he destroyed all evidence of him adopting Dexter, which lines up with the main show in season 1, where Dexter confronts Camilla about destroying the real files of him being found at the crime scene where his mother was killed. Back home, Dexter tells Harry that seeing the dead kid just made his urge to kill stronger, especially for the one responsible. Dexter tells Harry that he doesn't want to bottle up his feeling and he needs to kill, and he has the right person in mind. He tells Harry that he wants to kill a guy named Mad Dog, who's an old retired hitman for the mob. Harry warns Dexter multiple times that he's getting way too cocky and going after an assassin is way too ambitious, but Dexter just ignores his warnings. Deborah bursts into the room and once again gets mad for being excluded and Harry having no clue what's going on in her life, to which Harry says him and Dexter are dealing with a dead kid at work, which just makes her more upset. I've seen a lot of people say that this scene is extremely annoying, makes Deborah look like a douche, but once again, continuing off of what I said at my last video, she feels abandoned by her family, feels like she's invisible to them, which is a fair reason to be upset, I think. I think the way that the scene is written is weird. She can't be upset when she knows what they have to deal with at work, but she also has a valid point to be upset. It's kind of weird. The next day, Dexter breaks into Mad Dog's house, basically confirms that he's guilty of working for the mob and that he might kill someone again. Back at the police station, we see that Dexter performs his first ever blood analysis demonstration for La Guerta. Some of the other members of the force overhear what's going on and walk in to take a look, and everyone ended up being very impressed by Dexter. Later that night, we see Dexter desperately trying to tell Harry that Mad Dog is going to kill someone again, but Harry just does not care. He thinks Dexter's not ready and something bad will happen if he tries to do this without the proper experience of knowing what to do. The scene then transitions into a flashback of Harry with Dexter's birth mom, Laura Moser, where we see them officially become an item. We then go back to the present day where Dexter has kidnapped Mad Dog, put him on his table, but he wakes up too early, breaks free, starts running down the street, where then he is just randomly hit by a truck and killed instantly. Extremely plot convenient, but it's okay because the next episode makes it make more sense story-wise. Overall, fine episode, literally nothing to talk about, which is why I didn't upload this video video last week with just this episode. Episode 5 is the one I really wanted to talk about, and it works out because that one is basically just part 2 to this one. Episode 5 is titled F is for Fuck Up, appropriately named. After narrowly escaping the police searching Mad Dog's home, Dexter rushes home to see Harry sitting on the couch in disappointment. Dexter plays it off as if nothing that big of a deal happened, which makes Harry mad. He tells Dexter that the whole point of him teaching Dexter was so he wouldn't get caught and no one would escape and then possibly tell the police on him. He tells Dexter that from now on he's not going anywhere without his supervision, basically grounding Dexter, which is hilarious. Later we see Dexter get hungry and grab something to eat out of the fridge, but he accidentally eats Deborah's weed brownies that she made for her volleyball team. Deborah comes home to find Dexter super baked, and then she just fucks with him before deciding to eat some of the brownies herself and join him in being high. This scene is not only really funny, but really wholesome and shows really good growth between Deborah and Dexter, with them bonding and just growing closer together in general. We then see LaGuerta question the guy who ran over Mad Dog, and the guy is just a complete mess. He's crying and calling himself a murderer even though it was a complete accident. Dexter in this moment finally realizes his actions have consequences, especially when he makes a mistake as big as that. We then see Tanya watching horse racing, and a horse gets injured and sedated with M99, which gives Dexter the idea to start using it for his victims. We then see Harry go to court and testifying against the guy in the first episode that was arrested for allegedly killing a family in their own home. He ends up being outsmarted by the other lawyer, who pulls out a witness who gave the defendant an alibi. The judge declares him innocent, throws out the case, and the police captain is pissed at Harry, but the other cops actually try to comfort him. The show then cuts back to Dexter, and he has been trying to break into the horse racing place, and he finds the vet's office and steals a bunch of bottles of M99. We then see both Deborah and Harry visit Doris's grave separately, and both say their own very sweet and genuine piece. Harry's moments transitioned into a flashback once again, where we see Harry open up to Laura about his previously dead son, which ruined his marriage. But to Harry's surprise, he goes home to find out Doris is pregnant with Deborah, which makes him feel even more guilty for having an affair. We then see present-day Harry in his go-to bar spot, and Spencer, the police captain, finds him there and tells him he saved his job, but from now on he's gonna have to work the shitty cases with LaGuerta, which then brings us to the most interesting scene in probably the entire show thus far. Harry drunkenly drives to the criminal who got away, waits for him to come outside before taking his gun out, starts walking towards him with it in his hand. Before he can do anything, Dexter comes up behind him and ejects him with the M99, takes him to a kill room. Dexter tells Harry that he was right and he was unprepared and he made a mistake, but now he knows what he's doing, and this just proves it. Harry, obviously super pissed, tells Dexter he made his point and just let him out now. I love this scene for so many reasons. Like, imagine having the balls you gotta have to do that to your own father, much less when he's the one that taught you to do that. But hey, it is a great way to prove your point, which works. Harry tells Dexter that they already have the proof that Levi Reed is guilty, the criminal from earlier, so now just take him out. The episode then ends with Dexter going to Doris's grave, and he says a few words about how Doris knew something was wrong with Dexter and she tried to help him, but Harry prevented it and decided to turn him into a killer instead.
Deb asked me what I miss most about you, and I couldn't tell her the truth. I miss someone looking at me and seeing a chance at goodness, even if it wasn't there.
I love this whole scene, and everything he says is pretty depressing. The scene makes it clear that Dexter does in fact think about what his life would have been like if he weren't a monster, which we don't see fairly often in the main show, at least up until the point where people like Rita and Deborah died because of him being a killer. Overall, a great episode, and a nice way to end this sort of part 1, part 2 episodes. I'm glad I waited to talk about these episodes together, because my video about just episode 4 would have been like 5 minutes long and just a waste of time. From now on, I might just review 2 episodes together in one video, unless something actually insane and big happens in an individual episode. So far, I am enjoying the show, and there's really nothing offensive about it so far. Like, I have little nitpicks about the story moving along a little slow, and some stuff in the show feels a little retcon-y, if that makes sense. Like, some of the stuff feels like it would have never happened in the main show, but they just added it to give something extra to this show, which is really needed because this show's a little more basic than the main show and New Blood. There's not as much stuff and story to explore as the newer stuff, I think, so they kind of need something to throw in there, which is fine. Nothing thus far has been like, whoa, that's a major plot hole, what the fuck, or like, wow, Harry, Dexter, and Deborah would have never done that in the main show. Nothing like that, and hopefully it stays that way. Also, kind of related but unrelated, we know that Harry Morgan kills himself in the main show, and I'm curious if this show is like leading up to like kind of a downward spiral that he has up until where he just can't take it anymore and he takes his own life. I honestly have the feeling that that's how the show's gonna end, with him dying. Episode 6 is titled The Joy of Killing. The episode opens with Captain Spencer's ex-wife being knocked out by a man in a black outfit and their son being kidnapped. The show cuts to Harry, Maria, and Dexter examining a crime scene where Dexter thinks they're dealing with a serial killer, but LaGuerta doesn't believe him because there seems to be no pattern between this crime scene and the last supposed two. All 3 victims were not robbed and killed with all different weapons, which means they were murdered just for the fuck of it, but it's unclear if it was personal or not. Harry tells Dexter to hold on to this theory. He and LaGuerta will look into it. I'm actually kind of curious as to where this part of the story is going and if it has anything to do with the kidnapper from earlier. And speaking of which, we then see Captain Spencer's reaction to his kid being kidnapped, and he starts trashing an entire room out of anger. Pretty valid crash out, honestly. Spencer's ex-wife and her boyfriend show up, and the boyfriend starts fighting with Spencer, and which turns into a big scene with Spencer trying to grab the boyfriend, but he's stopped by Angel and Bobby, who break up the fight. Harry pulls Spencer aside and does his best to comfort him, and it's actually pretty sweet. I mean, if anyone knows what it feels like to lose a kid, it would be Harry. Later that night, we see Dexter stalking Levi Reed, making notes about his schedule and when he goes out to the bar. Dexter makes a couple jokes about how the fuck Levi pulls women with him being such a creep and a weirdo, and actually takes note of the way he charms a woman at the bar. Next day, we see Dexter trying to talk to Harry, who is deep in thought, and his thought transitions into a flashback where we see a serious escalation of Laura Moser's situation with being an undercover drug dealer. She's been taken to a warehouse and a man is tortured in front of her. Dealers basically tell her that she's taken the job of the dude getting tortured, and if she does what he did, she knows what will happen. I think at this point, the dealers suspect she's working with the police, but they're not 100% confident, so they're holding off on killing her because she is actually really crucial to their entire operation. I'm really curious to see what the final nail in the coffin will be where they figure it out and kill her. We then come back to Dexter, who's on a double date with Deborah. This entire scene is so awkward and kind of gives me secondhand embarrassment, but it's also funny as fuck. They're all sat down at a booth at a diner, and Dexter just orders the entire fucking menu for himself.
Double bacon cheeseburger with fries, a side of onion rings, and an order of the spicy hot wings. Oh, and a large Coke.
Actually, I don't really like spicy. You did order for me too, right?
No, that's all for me.
Bro really pulled a big smoke from Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. I'll have 2 number 9s, a number 9 large, a number 6 with extra dip, number 7, 2 number 45s, 1 with cheese, and a large soda. After dinner's done, the gang decides to play darts, and Dexter's date is sucking, so he does exactly what Levi Reed did earlier in the episode, grabs her hand and guides her to hitting dead center on the dartboard. And then we see some random drunk dude bump into Deborah and spill her drink, and her boyfriend, Gio, gets really mad, basically tells the dude off and scares him away. Dexter seems impressed, but Deborah, I feel like, doesn't know what to think in this situation. I've seen a lot of people say that they think Gio is the kidnapper, but like, why would he be? He holds kids hostage and then kills them just to get rich off of the ransom money. I guess I could see him doing that, but we've already done this before with Deborah falling in love with the psycho killer. Literally season 1 of the main show with the ice truck killer. So I think doing this again would be lame and lazy, but I guess I wouldn't be too mad if that was a twist that's revealed later on. Deborah decides she wants to fuck over one of the girls from her volleyball team as revenge for being a bitch in earlier episodes. All of them try to hotwire her car but are unsuccessful before Dexter offers his help and actually does it, which makes everyone very impressed. Deborah and Gio drive her car down the beach and basically into the ocean before running away giggling like schoolgirls. I could totally see this being the beginning of Gio trying to get Deborah to commit a bunch of more serious crimes with him if he is in fact the kidnapper. We then come back to Harry and LaGuerta the next day at Miami Metro, who are trying to figure out a connection between the random ass killings that Dexter examined. The scene transitions into a flashback where Doris Moser has given birth to Deborah, and she confronts Harry about having an affair. She tells him that whoever it is, just end it and focus on raising their new kid and all will be forgiven. We then see Dexter go back to stalking Levi Reed once again, but this time waiting for the opportune moment to nab him. While he's following him down Ocean Drive, a big ass fucking ice truck drives by. They really couldn't have made it more obvious, huh? One of my previous videos, I said how it would be weird if what the fans interpreted as an ice truck killer Easter egg was actually Brian Moser in the flesh. I had a whole debate in the comments about it, and a lot of people noted that Brian was probably nervous about approaching Dexter, probably had no clue what to say to him, and was basically building the courage to talk to him. In this scene, there ain't jack shit to interpret. I just look stupid as hell now. It's like the showrunner saw my video, was like, oh yeah, Lulu, you don't think that's Brian? Well, how about now, bitch? Bam. Whole ass ice truck driving by in the middle of the goddamn road. Alright, moving on. Levi Reed drunkenly walks into an alleyway to take a tinkle, proceeds to nab him using M99 for the first legitimate time and not as practice. When Levi wakes up, the first thing Dexter tells him is that he actually saved his life. Harry was going to do something he was going to regret by murdering him. Dexter knew Harry would never be able to live with the guilt and shame. A little foreshadowing towards his death, if you ask me. Dexter asks Levi why he killed those people, and especially the kids. Levi basically just says that it gave him pleasure, and he liked seeing the fear in their eyes before he killed them. Basic ass answer, but makes sense, I guess. Levi laughs in Dexter's face and tells him that Dexter is just like him, he just doesn't see it yet. Which I hope will be some kind of reference in Dexter Resurrection. Maybe Dexter will be forced to kill innocent people, and he will think back to this memory, as well as a few other killers that told him that he will become like them eventually, whether he likes it or not. Anyways, yeah, Dexter murders this man, and it's very satisfying to watch. Now that I think about it, maybe I shouldn't say that out loud. I feel like I'm going to be put on some government watch list or something, but whatever. We then cut to Miami Metro, who are trying to figure out a lead that will point them towards the kidnapper before he kills Spencer's kid. Spencer freaks out, cursing everyone out for having no leads, and he leaves the room. Harry goes into Spencer's office and has a heart-to-heart with him while sharing a drink together. Like I said earlier, if anyone can relate, it's Harry. We then see Dexter driving to the Everglades with Levi Reed's body in the back of his truck. When he gets there, the police have swarmed the area, blocked off the road, and are actively investigating the area. The camera pans over to show that the police have discovered body parts from people that Dexter has killed. And guess what? I was right. I fucking predicted that shit. But yeah, that's where the episode ends, on a big ass cliffhanger. I think this is by far the best Original Sin episode so far, because shit that actually matters to the story is actually happening now. I feel like this entire season, there has been literally no stakes so far. We know Dexter and Deborah will be fine. We know Harry will die. But now you introduce a situation where some of the new members of Miami Metro are in danger, and you're actually giving the show stakes. Like Spencer could die, Tanya could die, Bobby could die. I think Spencer is a likable enough character that I'm fairly invested to see what happens to him and his kid. I have a few theories on where this could go. 1, Spencer is killed by the kidnapper. 2, Spencer actually figures out who the kidnapper is and instead of arresting him, kills him and is fired for it. And the reason I say these are the only two options that could happen is because we know that Tom Matthews from the OG show is supposed to be police captain. So logically, you would have to get rid of Spencer so that the lore adds up with the main show. Unless they just retcon Matthews' existence and Spencer is just supposed to be Matthews now, which makes no sense. I mean, that's seemingly what they're doing with Dr. Evelyn Vogel from season 8, who I actually liked, by the way, but I think a lot of people didn't like her. So maybe they're just ignoring and or retconning her existence, which is not that big of a deal, but I feel like retconning Matthews is just fucking stupid. Bro was in almost every single episode of the main show. But yeah, I don't know. What the fuck do I know? Episode 7 is titled The Big Bad Body Problem. Dexter arrives at his own crime scene and quickly tells the cops that he's forensics. He goes to help Masuka get fingerprints off of Tony Ferreira's hand, and Dexter realizes that if he successfully gets the fingerprints off of the hand, it will lead straight to him. So he feeds the hand to a nearby gator and plays it off as an accident. After the crime scene, Dexter quickly tries to dispose of Levi Reed's body at a landfill, which is actually not a bad idea. Dexter reports back to Harry to film on everything that happened, and Dexter had my boy stressing. Bro had to smoke one to calm himself down. Sophia ends up dumping Dexter because she thinks Dexter's cheating on her, so Sophia tells Deborah what happened, and Deborah actually takes Dexter's side, saying that he would never cheat. And I really like that she did this because it's the start of Deborah and Dexter's close relationship and always having each other's backs. In the first episode, they fucking hate each other, and now they're actually sticking up for each other. It's a really sweet development. It's actually really enjoyable to see develop on screen. LaGuerta and Harry go to Spencer about their case, and they think they might have a serial killer on their hands. Spencer reluctantly allows them to pursue it. Dexter passes Angel in Miami Metro and sees he's trying to pursue the Tony Ferreira case. Dexter talks him out of it, telling him that the dude got what was coming to him and the case doesn't deserve his time anyways because there's literally no evidence. Dexter goes into the records room to research a new place to dump his bodies and starts imagining some famous serial killers and starts talking to them. Dexter imagines fucking John Wayne Gacy, who is known as the Chicago Killer Clown. Dexter starts mocking him for hiding bodies underneath his floorboards in crawl space, and then makes a joke saying Harry would be mad at him if he did that. Dexter then decides to go quote-unquote hypothetically ask some of the other members of Miami Metro where they would hide bodies. Masuka says he would taxidermy hot girls. One of the cops says they would invite Hannibal Lecter over for dinner, and then the last cop says he would dump them at a construction site the night before they poured the cement, which is a very clear Easter egg to the Trinity Killer when it's revealed he would not kill in threes but in fours, with his final victim being a kid, and that's how he would get rid of the body. Harry then walks in and asks what they're talking about. Dexter just awkwardly says like, nothing, and then Masuka just proudly states that they're debating the best ways to hide a dead body. Harry stops for a minute and just gives Dexter a dirty look. They really nailed the comedy in this show. And then the show takes a drastic ass dark turn where we see Nicky, the kid that had been kidnapped. His finger had been chopped off and mailed to Miami Metro just like the last kid. While examining the evidence, we see that Dexter realizes that the killer's blood is on the box and there's a hesitation cut on the finger. Dexter realizes that Spencer is bleeding from his wrist and also puts it together that the killer would in fact hesitate if it was the killer's own son. And they conveniently have the same blood type. Great acting on the actor's part, because when he turns his face to look at Spencer, Dexter looks fucking terrified. And then Dexter finally composes himself and gives a cocky grin before saying,
I suddenly realized I might need a new victim dumping ground, even sooner than I thought.
And the last thing we see is Spencer buying the food that the kidnapper was feeding the kid. I have a few thoughts on this plot twist and the episode in general. Spencer is basically just the anti-Dexter. I'm hoping they'll make his killer side a little more unique and interesting as we go through the last couple episodes, but I guess we'll see. Overall, a fine episode with a lot of funny moments. We get to see the process of Dexter figuring out where to dump his bodies, which is really cool. The ending moves along the story in a huge way as well. Episode 8 is titled Business and Pleasure. The episode begins with Dexter trying to tell Harry he thinks Spencer is the kidnapper, but of course Harry tells him to fuck off because Spencer has served on the force for 30 years. I mean, if I was in Harry's shoes and someone accused my best friend of kidnapping his own kid, I'd call him fucking crazy too. Harry tells Dexter to go find Deborah because she left to go to Gio's and hasn't come back and he's worried about her. Harry and LaGuerta leave for Tampa to track down a potential serial killer on the loose, and before LaGuerta leaves her house, we see her kiss some guy goodbye. The guy is actually revealed to be Miguel Prado from season 3 of Dexter, and LaGuerta makes a joke about him being delusional for wanting to be DA one day, which we know that's what his occupation is in Dexter. I think this is such a cool one scene cameo, especially knowing in Dexter season 3 that Miguel and Maria have a history together. While Dexter's at work and trying to search for Deb, Camilla and Tanya put a shit ton of work on his desk, tell him that Spencer was impressed by his blood work and wants to give him all their cold cases to work on. Dexter immediately gets suspicious because why would Spencer want him to work on any case except the most important one? While Camilla is in the room, she drops a little line about letting Dexter borrow their boat, which comes in handy later on. He witnesses Spencer give a little plastic bag to a guy who takes it and goes inside a house with it while Spencer drives away. Dexter immediately calls Harry and tells him what happened, and Harry tells Dexter that he's not a detective and just go be a good brother and find Deb. Dexter gets Gio's apartment address and goes there just to find out that Gio has a fiance, which makes for a really funny and awkward conversation. The girl gives Dexter Gio's whereabouts. Dexter realizes he's gonna need a boat to get there. He borrows Camilla's boat to go find Deborah, which is named Slice of Pie, which is really funny and wholesome because we know that Camilla's favorite food is lemon pie. Harry and Maria investigate a murder in Tampa and find out that the victim was a doctor at a mental hospital. They start going through all the files of the doctor's patients who could be the potential killer. That's when Harry finds a file on Brian Moser and pockets the file when Maria isn't looking. Honestly, didn't think that's where this whole serial killer subplot was going, but now I'm really happy because Brian's origin story is something I've always wanted to see, and I'm sure a lot of fans feel that way. Anyways, going back to Deborah, she figures out Gio's involved in some sort of illegal business. It's not directly stated what it is, just something illegal, I guess. Gio gets mad at Deborah, dumps her, leaving her stranded on this little island. Luckily, Dexter had been tracking her down and gave her a ride back home. While on the way home, Deborah drops something in the ocean and immediately regrets it. Dexter makes a remark about how once it's in the ocean, it's gone forever, which then gives him the idea to start dumping the bodies in the ocean. When Dexter gets home, he gets called by Miami Metro to report to work because they're about to perform a SWAT raid. When they get to the location, Dexter realizes it's the same house that Spencer delivered a package to and he had planned this entire thing. The episode ends with a flashback of Laura, Dexter, and Brian being kidnapped and put into a shipyard container. 3 men start chainsawing someone in front of them, and we see that Dexter is looking at the blood, and the camera zooms into his eye, which is kind of cheesy, but I think it's like a really cool shot because it shows the moment where like the violence and the blood is forever engraved into his memory at a young age. Pretty sure they aged up baby Dexter by a few years for the show, but it's not a huge difference, so I don't really mind. Overall, not a very eventful episode, just a lot of setup for the next 2 episodes, which is fine. At least they're building up to an ending and not just rushing. I still don't know how to feel about Spencer being the villain, and I'm interested to see where that goes. I think it's interesting that he knows Dexter's onto him, and he's trying to subtly prove that he's innocent, but by doing so, he's making Dexter more suspicious of him. Episode 9 is titled Blood Drive. The episode begins with the same person from earlier in the show who approached Dexter at the diner, and it's confirmed to be, in fact, Brian. I had a feeling that was gonna happen. I thought Brian was just gonna be like a little Easter egg at first. I had no idea they were gonna fully bring him into the show as part of the plot. Brian is sitting at a retirement home playing bingo with an older woman named Barb, and we don't know why until a flashback later on in the episode. We see that Brian and Dexter were originally adopted together, but Brian became so violent and out of control, Harry and Doris sent him away. We see that this woman named Barb was responsible for separating Dexter and Brian as kids, making Dexter forget Brian existed. As soon as I realized it was the same person, I literally went, oh my god, she is fucked.
You promised me you wouldn't separate me and Dexter, but you did. Now I'm gonna separate you.
Honestly, I can't even blame Brian. He's kind of not even in the wrong here. Obviously, murder is bad, but his feelings are totally valid. We see present-day Harry looking at Brian's mental hospital file and then back at the killings. Harry reads this little note that reads, Brian does not seem to be progressing. Patterns are starting to repeat. Fixated on brother to the point of obsession. And then the part that really punches me in the gut. I want to see my brother. Dexter needs me. That's so sad, bro. Like, this show's supposed to be funny. Even though Brian is way more fucked up and twisted than Dexter, I can't help to feel extremely bad for him. All he wanted was his brother, and his brother doesn't even know he exists. Obviously, we know that Dexter doesn't find out until like 15 years later in season 1 of the main show. Curious to see if Harry will find Brian and maybe convince him to stay away from Dexter or something like that. At this point, Harry has figured out that Brian is out of the mental hospital and is searching for Dexter, so tracking down Brian would make perfect sense. And now we get to see the last bit of the episode where Dexter is fully convinced Spencer's the kidnapper, so he sets up a kill room for him in the specific arcade where Spencer used to take his son all the time. Dexter successfully gets him and traps him to this table and interrogates Spencer about why he did it. Spencer plays innocent for a good while until he eventually slips up that he kidnapped his own son just to get back at his ex-wife for divorcing him and making his son hate him. And I gotta say right now, if that's the entire reason why I hate it, that's fucking stupid. Where my wife left me and took the kids, so now I'm gonna go out kidnapping random children. Are you fucking serious? Listen, I get it's like part of the moral of the story. There's not just evil and good, there's somewhere in the middle. People like Dexter who aren't evil but do evil things. Like, I get that part. Dexter also says to himself that he realizes that one singular moment can turn a hero into a monster, which is also part of the moral of the story. But I don't know, I just think Spencer's motivation for going insane is because he's a petty bitch is just dumb. Maybe the finale can turn it around, but I guess we'll see. The thing I do find very interesting though is that Dexter purposely lets him go free, and I'm thinking it's 1, so Spencer can lead him to where his kid is, and 2, prove that he's guilty, because at this point Harry still does not believe him at all. And I mean, why would he? Alright, moving on to the finale, titled Code Blues. The episode begins with a fairly short origin story for Brian. Even if it's really short, I'll take it. Brian has always been my favorite character, and like I said earlier, I've been wanting to see an origin or just flashbacks. We hear Brian talking to his therapist and telling him that he went from foster home to foster home and got repeatedly abused by other kids. When he would finally fight back, he would get kicked out. He eventually got put into a mental hospital, which seemed fine until he was older. He befriended this one staff member named Raul. When Brian got older, Raul started selling Brian's medication for some extra cash, which obviously fucked over Brian. Brian was pissed and beat the shit out of him. When Brian is released out of the mental hospital, we see him go on a rampage and kill everyone who fucked him over as a kid, and then start his search for his long-lost brother, Dexter. Brian figures out that Dexter works forensics at Miami Metro, so he kills Barb from last episode pretty close to Miami Metro in hopes hopes that Dexter will show up. Instead of Dexter showing up, Harry shows up and realizes immediately that Brian was responsible. Harry realizes that Brian waits at every crime scene for Dexter, so Harry spots Brian and then runs to confront him on a nearby rooftop. Brian and Harry have this really sad conversation that just makes me feel so bad for both characters. Brian confronts Harry about ruining his life and Dexter's life and getting them separated, and Harry basically tells Brian that he never intended to hurt him. He only wanted to help the two of them the best way he knew how. Harry tells Brian that if he loves Dexter so much, then he'll realize that the best way to protect Dexter is just to stay away from him. Brian's so fucked up and twisted and holds so much pain and suffering with him that it would ruin Dexter's life if he ever found out. And for all Brian knows, Dexter's an innocent human being with no urges to kill. Harry tells Brian that it's okay if he hated him, but he needs to know that he was trying his best to protect Dexter and give him a good upbringing. Brian stops and just realizes that everything Harry is saying is completely right, so he knocks Harry out and then runs away. He leaves a little message in blood that says, "You're right." I find this scene so interesting because it felt like Brian wanted nothing but to just kill Harry right then and there, but he realized that he still somewhat cares about Harry, and killing him would more so fuck up Dexter, which is ultimately the only person he actually cares about. I truly think they couldn't have chosen anyone better for Harry. Christian Slater just brings such a weight and gravitas to the character of Harry. When you look at Slater's version of Harry, you could just see how much guilt he carries around with him and how much pain he's in because of all the things that have happened in his life. James Remar is obviously iconic and synonymous with the character of Harry, but always viewed Remar's version to be a more wholesome and caring version of Harry, where Slater's is more intense. They're both equally perfect for the role in their own ways. Anyways, while all this is happening, Dexter is following Spencer to an abandoned boat that is literally right next to Miami Metro, which makes Dexter extremely dumbfounded that Spencer would kidnap kids so close to the station. Spencer realizes he's fucked, so he makes Nikki's room fill with water, makes Dexter choose between saving the kid or going after him. Obviously, Dexter goes to save the kid. Dexter pulls him out of the water, brings him to the deck of the boat, and shoots some flares into the air before fleeing the scene. Dexter predicts that Spencer would go to his ex-wife's house to try to kill her, and he ends up being right. He yoinks Spencer before he could harm her. He throws Spencer on his boat and drives out into the ocean, and I think everyone knows where this is going. Dexter tries to confront Spencer one last time, and he still just has no regret and plays the victim card, saying that his ex-wife lied about Nikki being his actual son, and she cheated on him and then made Nikki hate him. There's this really cool shot where Dexter pulls his knife up to him and makes him look at his own reflection, with Dexter also looking at his. Dexter asks Spencer what it feels like to fail at it being a husband, father, cop, and just a human being. And I like that he says this as he looks at his own reflection, because I think it symbolizes the fact that he feels the same way about himself sometimes. Maybe not right now in this moment, but definitely in the later seasons of the main show. Spencer asks him to get it over with, so Dexter kills him, chops up his body parts, puts some in trash bags, and drops them in the ocean for the first ever time. Dexter goes home to greet Harry, and Harry finally admits that he should have listened to Dexter about Spencer, and he was sincerely sorry that he didn't. Harry tells Dexter that he is genuinely proud of the man he's become, even if he is a killer. He successfully channeled his urges for good, and that was the best possible outcome. Harry, Dexter, and Deborah go to a restaurant to celebrate, where Deborah tells them she's gonna enroll in a police academy to become a cop. The episode ends with a really wholesome scene of them dancing at the restaurant together before we see the camera pan over and show Brian watching them through a window, and he actually tears up. I have a lot of thoughts on this finale, and I'm not sure where to start. I actually like that it has a somewhat happy ending. When you watch the main Dexter show, every finale just gets sadder and more tragic, and it's about time that Dexter got a happy ending, even if it is only temporary. I think it would have worked a little better if the plot twist was revealed an episode or two earlier and Spencer's motivation wasn't as stupid. I think for Dexter's first ever villain, he works very well, and the whole thing about Dexter hating kid killers has become pretty full circle. I'm eventually going to rank all the villains as a video on the channel, and I think when I do, Spencer will probably be right in the middle. Not bad, but it could have been better. I think bringing in young Brian was a really good decision and made for some really sad moments in this later part of the show. You really just can't help but to feel bad for him. And now it makes sense why Brian waits like 15 years before meeting Dexter for real. Brian was always watching him, but did not want to ruin his life. When Brian figures out that Dexter is a killer just like him, that's when everything completely changes, and both Dexter and Brian kind of resent Harry for keeping each other apart. In my last video, I ranked every season, and for one, I had season 1, 2 was season 2, 3 was season 4, and 5 was New Blood. I think I would put Original Sin just below New Blood, because while New Blood is very controversial for very fair reasons, I think it had a lot more interesting concepts going on. New Blood had a more serious and dramatic tone. It had a more interesting villain with a more fleshed out backstory and reason for killing. The return of both Harrison and Deborah is extremely interesting to watch and develop. I think New Blood has a deeper and more complex moral to it. That season covers things like running from your mistakes and taking accountability for your actions. Original Sin's moral is basically not everyone is all evil or all good, and don't kill kids, I guess. Not as deep, it's way more simple and straightforward, but also more fun and entertaining. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think I like New Blood a little more because it gave the viewer more things to really think about. Overall, I think Original Sin is a huge win for Paramount, and all the haters and naysayers should really give the show a try before they talk shit about it and just call it a lazy cash grab. And with that being said, I want to thank everyone for watching. It's been super fun covering the show basically week to week and talking about theories and ideas with everyone in the comments. Feel free to leave a comment about your thoughts and opinions on anything Dexter related, and I will read it and I will give it a reply. Goodbye.